United we play, united we win.
Deep right field, another absolute bomb over the flag court.
We are family.
Outstanding effort again.
We're busting ours to kick yours.
That's big time.
-15.
Respect all, fear none.
Oh, did he belt that one?
Intensity is not a perfume.
It was a no-doubter.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We are up in the bird's nest here at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. I'm Brendan Mortensen alongside Annie. We were so excited to come on this podcast and talk about the official start of baseball season. Pitchers and catchers have reported to Ed Smith Stadium, to the Orioles spring training complex down in Sarasota, Florida. Baseball had officially begun. We're ramping up to the World Baseball Classic. We're getting ready for the season. Football is over. And then here we are talking about injuries. If you are a longtime listener of the show, which A, I hope you are, and B, I'm sorry, you know that I start a lot of episodes, and especially last year, going, well, gosh darn it, if we could just go without talking about injuries one time. And the season has not even begun yet. Spring training has not even started. The first game isn't here. And yet, here we are talking about injuries.
It's a little bit of deja vu because it was just about this time last year when we were in Sarasota, and then we were so excited, and then all of a sudden you hear about Grayson Rodriguez and Albert Suarez and Chase McDermott, Trevor Rogers, everything. And you're like, well, and Gunnar Henderson as well. And so this time around, you were very excited. And of course, what happens is there's some injury notes.
And of course, here we are. That is unfortunately going to be our topic of discussion today, which is that Jackson Holliday is starting the season on the injured list with a broken right hamate bone. We will get into what the heck that is, what the heck it means for this team, for the beginning of the regular season, for a potential roster construction shakeup. There are some other injury news to report as well. Jordan Westberg tweaked his oblique 3 weeks ago and may miss the first few spring training games, but Mike Elias did say it sounds like that injury is going to be measured more in days, and the Jackson Holliday injury, luckily, will be measured more in weeks than in months. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time to talk about the fact that the fans voted your team the best from our fantasy draft last week, which I don't even have time to get upset about it anymore.
That's the biggest bummer of them all, is that we can't even harp on the fact that my team won.
Look, I'm not upset that your team won. I'm more upset that my team came in last in the fan vote, considering my team had 100 more WAR than Bones' team. I know Bones had some big names. It was a very fun team. He had a lot of guys that were short spurts, really good. My team was a bunch of older guys. I don't think my team had the vibes.
That's why we throw longevity matters on that graphic.
And it never
nobody
matters.
pays attention. I think next year we need to make a graphic that's like literally just 4 words. Longevity, only O's stats.
Yeah.
Just like
whatever.
everything.
I draft for the love of the game and not for the votes, and I think I drafted a good team, but also nobody cares about this right now because the injury news just broke.
Exactly.
So let's get into that.
Okay.
As mentioned, Jackson Holliday has a broken hamate bone in his right hand, and it sounds like this is going to be a matter of weeks rather than a matter of months. However, it does mean that Holliday will start the season on the injured list. Mike Elias did confirm. For a little more context on that, Jeff Passan tweeted this morning, for those unfamiliar, the hamate bone, which could cause Corbin Carroll, Francisco Lindor, and Jackson Holliday to miss opening day, is a small hook-shaped bone on the palm just underneath the pinky that is particularly susceptible to breaking. While the recovery is typically 4 to 6 weeks, so that's what we could be looking at for Jackson Holliday, hitters who undergo the surgery to fix it often talk about how their power takes months to return. It's not like a soft tissue injury. The return timeline on hamates is fairly straightforward. The time to full health, however, can be longer. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. Yes, you are glad that this injury is measured in weeks and not months for Jackson Holliday, and he may be able to get back on the field somewhere in that 4 to 6 weeks timeline. The field will probably be a minor league field, considering he is missing all of spring training, will need a ramp up. We saw Gunnar Henderson struggle a little bit at the start of last year because he missed a large majority of spring training. He didn't have that ramp up period. He had to ramp up at the big league level. I would imagine this kind of injury, especially given the fact that Holliday is missing spring training, will require a rehab stint and probably a relatively lengthy one to get back up to playing shape. The hamate bone, there's no way around it. We have heard about this a lot with past injuries from past players, that it takes a while for your power to fully return. I think of an example like former top prospect Robert Hassel III had a broken hamate bone, I believe, and then it took him a long time to get the power back, even though he was back on the field actually playing. So we'll see what this means for Jackson Holliday. He can get back on the field hopefully in weeks, and then the full recovery might take a little bit longer than that.
Yeah, and it's bizarre, too, because it's the same issue that Corbin Carroll and Francisco Lindor are dealing with right now. Corbin Carroll will have that surgery. Francisco Lindor, I don't think they're still kind of reviewing his issue, but for Jackson Holliday, the surgery is tomorrow. And, Jeff Passan's tweet makes it make sense a little bit more because it sounds like it complicates it a little bit more, but in the sense of, okay, you might get Jackson Holliday back within 3 to 4 weeks, but he's not going to be the same kind of hitter that he was before this because you can't necessarily get that grip strength all the way back, that power, like you mentioned, all the way back. So that is a huge blow. I know that with the Blaze Alexander trade coming into play, you think, oh, well, it makes so much more sense that they went and got out Blaze Alexander, which apparently actually happened the day before they found out about this Jackson Holliday issue and injury. So kind of a little bit of really good luck there for the Orioles in getting Blaze Alexander. So you're lucky that you have him. And we talk about all the time, which is going to be the main topic of conversation that follows this Jackson Holliday injury, is, having a logjam or depth or figuring out who breaks camp is a good problem to have because, look, something like this happens and the answers start to come at you whether you like it or not, and the pieces just fall into place because that's exactly what's going to happen with our conversation about bench construction and camp battles too.
It always unfortunately sorts itself out. This is something that we like to remind you of pretty much every offseason when you look at a potential roster and say, man, this looks really, really crowded. We have had the conversation a lot about what this Orioles bench is going to look like. Is there going to be enough room to keep both Ryan Mountcastle and Kobe Mayo? Now both Blaze Alexander and Jeremiah Jackson. Will Leody Taveras be a lock for the roster as the pure bench outfielder? Okay, there's room for one more of those guys now because you need somebody to replace Jackson Holliday. Right. There's not a ton more we can say on the Holliday injury specifically other than the fact that we hope it's a speedy recovery and we hope to see him back at the big leagues at some point soon. It does shift our conversation into what do they do from here, which transitions into the conversation we were planning on having, which was the Blaze Alexander discussion, because the Orioles acquired him via trade from the Diamondbacks last week in exchange for reliever Cade Stroud and prospects Wellington Aracena and Jose Mejia. You did mention that, ironically, they made this deal the day before it sounds like they found out about this Jackson Holliday injury. So if you were putting the pieces together and saying, yeah, that makes the Alexander trade make a little bit more sense, yes and no, because it does make sense now from a team need perspective, but at the time, they were just trading for a good player, and he was a good player last year. 1.7 baseball reference WAR, a 230, 323, 383 slash line with a 706 OPS, 7 homers, 12 doubles in 74 games, but his real value comes defensively, where he can be a utility infielder, but he can also play a corner outfield or center field, which is extremely valuable.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of bizarre that it worked out the way that it did. I mean, working out the way that it did is a very
they would have preferred to have Alexander as a bench piece and Jackson Holliday starting, exactly. But sure, here we are.
And then also just two really quick smaller injury notes. Colin Selby hits the injured list with some shoulder inflammation, and he's likely not ready for opening day.
Yeah.
And that, of course, will play into our bullpen conversation later in this podcast as well. And then Zach Eflin is a full go, having a normal camp, so that's great to hear on his end after a major back surgery. But for Blaze Alexander, yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head. The defense is why you got him. I mean, he's another fast option to have as well on defense and on the base paths. So he and Leody Taveras are great options for pinch running opportunities or just even on defense. So he's in the 86th percentile for sprint speed. His chase rate went down 4% since 2024, so some progress there. The strikeout numbers went up a little bit, but it's still, he's not having played an entire season in 2024 or 2025. So we'll see what it's like in his third professional base or MLB season. But you get a guy in Blaze Alexander that has a lot of team control, a lot of defensive versatility, and just having depth options right now sounds really good when you're already starting down the path of injuries.
Yeah, you're going to need him. I think at the time of this acquisition, it seemed like he was going to be firmly in play for the utility infield competition with Jeremiah Jackson, maybe also in play for just the outfield conversation as well, given the fact that he can play a corner outfield and he also can play center field, which is a massive box to check, considering before that the only option you had in center field was Leody Taveras as a bench piece. Of course, Colton Cowser can play center. Dylan Beavers can probably play a little bit of center as well.
And for like his appearances, I have second base, third base, shortstop, left field, center field, DH.
Yeah.
Which is pretty good.
Yeah, he's been all over the place, and he's a good defender everywhere. 70th percentile fielding run value, according to StatCast. 70th percentile outs above average. You mentioned the 86th percentile sprint speed as well. So he has the athleticism to play everywhere. At this point, though, given the news that we just heard, it sounds like Alexander could be seeing a lot of time at second base. I think he is the one that probably fits most naturally into that role. I think Jeremiah Jackson is a possibility there as well. There is also the possibility, we have to see how Jordan Westberg comes back. We are assuming and hoping from the sounds of things that he will only miss a few spring training games and that he should be back on the field relatively soon, which hopefully means that he will be ready for opening day. Is there a scenario where Jordan Westberg gets a good amount of time at second base and potentially Kobe Mayo gets a lot of time at third base? There's a few different machinations there, I think.
I mean, to me, it went from the bench construction, in my mind at least, when you had a healthy Jackson Holliday, was, okay, the camp battle is between Jeremiah Jackson and Kobe Mayo.
Sure.
Right now, to me, it feels like you could have Blaze Alexander and Kobe Mayo starting at the big league level on opening day, and then Jeremiah Jackson starting in the minors. It seems to make a little bit more sense to me there if you already have like a very versatile utility defender in Blaze Alexander that you kind of know would get that spot more so over Jeremiah Jackson, because Jeremiah Jackson has minor league options and Blaze doesn't, where it seems to make a little bit more sense now in my mind that you have Kobe Mayo starting on the roster opening day and Blaze Alexander, and then Jeremiah Jackson kind of just lingering in the minor leagues in AAA until another injury happens or you kind of feel a need for him more. So I think that is the way, in my mind at least, I think it's going to play out, which is a bummer because Jeremiah Jackson was also such a great player and proved himself in 2025, at least towards the end. So that hurts, but I think that if you have more, I don't know, it's tough because Blaze Alexander and Jeremiah Jackson seem like very similar players.
Yeah.
At least in where they can fit in.
But it might be more simple than we're making it. The way that I see it here is that when this acquisition was made, it felt like you had 3 bench spots up for grabs between Ryan Mountcastle, Kobe Mayo, Blaze Alexander, Jeremiah Jackson, and Leody Taveras. Now, with the injury to Jackson Holliday, there are only, I think, 9 locks to make this team as position players. Adley, Basayo, Alonso, Westberg, Henderson, Ward, Cowser, O'Neill, Beavers. Those guys are all locks to make the opening day roster, assuming that there aren't injuries and they start the year on the injured list. That leaves 4 spots up for grabs between Mountcastle, Mayo, Alexander, Jackson, and Taveras, in our minds. Anyway, there are certainly other guys at camp that are competing for spots. To me, if you have 4 spots up for grabs, and 5 guys that could get those spots, and one of them has 3 minor league options remaining.
Right.
Yeah, that might make sense there for Jeremiah Jackson. I know that Kobe Mayo has that versatility as well, and maybe there still is a camp battle between Kobe Mayo and Jeremiah Jackson. Kobe Mayo has 1 minor league option remaining. Jeremiah Jackson has 3.
Right.
math there tells me that one guy might have the edge just in terms of roster flexibility down the stretch.
My ideal 13 position players, I know you named the 9 that felt like locks. But my ideal 13 is Adley Basayo, Alonso, Ryan Mountcastle, Blaze Alexander, Gunnar Henderson, Jordan Westberg. Obviously, if the oblique is healed, Taylor Ward, Tyler O'Neill, Cowser, Beavers, Jeremiah Jackson, and Kobe Mayo. But that leaves Leody Taveras, who doesn't have any options, and you would have to start him at AAA by DFAing him and then clearing outright waivers, which seems unlikely. So I don't think that they would take that risk when you could just put Jeremiah Jackson there and still have 2 options left after that.
There are still a lot of dominoes, and this is news that just broke very recently, so we're almost still working it out with you as well. Yeah. I do think Leody Taveras makes sense to be on the roster given his center field versatility if Blaze Alexander is now in a scenario where he needs to play a lot of infield, which it sounds like he is probably going to need to, because you have Pete Alonso, Gunnar Henderson, Jordan Westberg as your 3 everyday infielders. And then second base, third base is going to have to be filled by some combination of Westberg, and then maybe it's Mayo, Alexander, or Jackson. Mayo and Alexander could have the edge there. Jeremiah Jackson, again, do not want to downplay what he did last season. He had a very, very good 2025 coming up at the trade deadline, bouncing into the corner outfield just because the Orioles needed him to. He put the bat on the ball a lot, made a lot of hard contact. He is absolutely a contender to make this roster. The only reason that we're saying that the other 2 guys might have a leg up is purely because of their lack of minor league options, whereas Jeremiah Jackson has 3. But if Alexander and Mayo are playing a lot of infield, I think it probably makes sense to have Taveras as your pure bench outfield piece.
Yeah, no, it does make sense.
So that kind of brings us almost full circle in that bench conversation that we are going to have, because it's almost worked itself out a little bit.
Right.
There probably is still competition there. Not probably, there is still competition there. 4 spots available for presumably those 5 guys. And that's going to be a key storyline to watch. But I think in terms of who takes Jackson Holliday's playing time, Blaze Alexander and Kobe Mayo make the most sense, with Alexander just slotting right into that second base spot that Holliday was at, or Jordan Westberg sliding over to second base and Kobe Mayo getting some reps at third base, which was his natural position throughout the minor leagues. I think that probably makes the most sense at this point.
Yeah, and it would be great to see Kobe Mayo get some more reps at third base at the big league level as well, just because, like you said, it was his natural position. He had to work to make it to first base. That was probably his only avenue to get to the big leagues, was because of Jordan Westberg being at third, and then obviously having a little bit more vacancy at first base. So you've seen a lot of progress from Kobe Mayo on the defensive side of things, trying to solidify his spot at first base, but now we're seeing a little bit more room for him to maybe slot back into his natural position, which would be great to see. I think it would be kind of fun to witness him getting more reps there. Maybe he has had a change of heart. Maybe he likes first base more now. I don't know. But that is something we will figure out.
Yeah.
And I do think it just makes so much more sense because Jeremiah Jackson has the most minor league options.
Yeah. Michael on Facebook commenting, can't believe Jeremiah Jackson didn't earn a certainty going into this year. It's just a lot of competition. Jeremiah Jackson played really good baseball last year, and he is certainly in that opening day conversation. You could swap him in to that conversation that we are having in terms of guys that can play second base and third base. Jackson was an infielder throughout his minor league career. We just saw him in the corner outfield last season because that's where the Orioles needed him to be. So there's absolutely going to be competition this spring, and there is absolutely a chance that Jackson makes this opening day roster. We're just looking at the minor league options from a practical standpoint of this thing.
And with the way that the injuries tend to happen, or at least they have in the last 2 seasons, you could see someone like a Tyler O'Neill or even Dylan Beavers, hopefully not, getting injured and then having to have Jeremiah Jackson come up instantly.
Yeah, hopefully you don't see it.
Hopefully you don't see it, but that is
happen.
typically how the cookie decides to crumble.
Yes.
And what we will likely witness.
Unfortunately, it is. Unfortunately, it is. There are inevitably going to be injuries like there are now. We got a question on Facebook wondering how injuries happen before the season actually happens. They're working out in the offseason.
Yeah.
It's not like they're not playing baseball. We don't know exactly how this hamate injury happened for Jackson Holliday, but they are in the cages. They are getting defensive
I think it was
work
live
done.
BP.
Yeah, they are working. It's not like they are just going for the
Right.
off season and they're just like fishing every single day for, months on end. Like they're still working
Right.
on baseball. They take a little bit of a break,
But this is why we say that depth is key.
yeah.
Like this is what they might not have planned for Blaze Alexander to be the starting second baseman come opening day, but they were like, okay, let's get some depth. We need some depth. We might as well risk losing Cade Stroud out of the bullpen, which we know has some question marks as well, but we're going to need infield position player depth regardless. And then the next day they find out that Jackson Holliday breaks a bone in his hand.
The depth conversations that we have on this podcast are never the most watched podcasts, but they are important. That they're not the sexiest conversations,
Right.
but they're conversations that we need to have because stuff like this happens. But you mentioned Cade Stroud. Let's talk about
Sure.
the flip side of that Blaze Alexander trade a little bit, which was sending most notably Cade Stroud to the Diamondbacks. He was really good last year. 25 games, a 1.71 ERA. He didn't give up many hits, and the ball rarely left the yard. 8.2 Ks per nine, did have 4.4 walks per nine. Believe it was 0.3 home runs per nine. Here's the thing about Cade Stroud. 57 at-bats were in low leverage situations last year, according to Baseball Reference, compared to 14 in medium leverage and 19 in high leverage. So you weren't throwing him into super high-pressure situations in the second half of last year. That's maybe thing A that the Orioles could have been looking at. Thing B, his projections for next year do not look great. Projections don't mean everything, but if you are looking somewhere like Fangraphs at Cade Stroud's projections, there are a bunch of different metrics that are used to project his ERA for next year. Pretty much all of them projected that ERA to be over 4. And if you're wondering why that's the case, it's because Stroud had a really good BABIP, which is batting average on balls in play against him. That's not really a thing a pitcher can control. It's not purely luck, but that is going to more than likely come back to earth next year, meaning if guys are hitting the ball hard, it is probably going to land in bad places more than it did a season ago. And the home run per nine numbers are probably going to come back down to earth as well. That's not to say that Cade Stroud won't be a good reliever next year. He absolutely could be. But if you are looking at just purely the 1.71 ERA and going, how on earth could the Orioles move on from a guy like that? That could be some of the contributing factors.
Right. And also when you look at his StatCast profile, it does seem like, okay,
It's a lot of red. It's a lot of good.
It's a lot of red. He didn't qualify for most of it, but it does look very good. So you have the flashiness of that and then the flashiness of the 1.71 ERA. But at the same time, like I personally was looking forward to seeing him in the bullpen and getting more time this season. But at the same time, you have so much depth in AAA already, and arguably guys who have flashier profiles that we haven't even seen in the big leagues yet, who I'm sure we're going to discuss.
Yeah.
But also, Cade Stroud would mainly come in last year in only 26 and 1/3 innings, but he would mainly come in the 7th and 8th and 9th inning when, towards the end of the season, you dealt out a lot of guys away at the trade deadline. Brian Baker, Gregory Soto, Sir Anthony Dominguez, Andrew Kittredge, and now you get two guys in the offseason in Andrew Kittredge and Ryan Helsley, who are likely going to be your 1-2 punch to close the game. Kittredge coming in most likely in the 7th and 8th innings, and then Helsley to close it out in the 9th. So if things go according to plan with those two, you weren't necessarily going to use Cade Stroud in those spots as much in 2026 anyway. He probably would have come in earlier when you have a lot of other options to throw people in there as well.
Yeah, the hierarchy was going to shift this year. Helsley and Kittredge, like you mentioned, Helsley you're going to see in the 9th inning. Kittredge you're going to see a lot in the 7th and 8th innings. Keegan Aiken you are probably going to see in the 7th, 8th innings a lot as well. Maybe in your Cano if there is a bounce-back season there. Maybe Tyler Wells if he starts the season in the bullpen. He is a guy that you would probably feel comfortable with in high-leverage situations. I don't know where you personally rank Cade Stroud in terms of that power ranking. I think those guys are probably getting the high leverage work over Cade Stroud going into next year. So you're talking about a reliever that would come in more than likely in the 6th and 7th innings rather than the 8th and definitely the ninth
Yeah.
innings next year. So that's not a super high leverage arm. It's still a good arm, and like you said, the StatCast page looked really good. An expected ERA last year of 280, an expected batting average of 192, didn't give up a lot of hard hits. That's all good stuff. Of course, a 171 ERA is really good. But you have to give up something good to get something good in return. Blaze Alexander is a good player that now seems like a very necessary player to have on this roster, and we're not trying to disparage Cade Stroud here. But A, there are some reasons to believe that it's not going to be a 171 ERA next season. And B, yeah, you gave up value to get a good player. That's how trades have to work.
And important to note as well, who else you gave up for Blaze Alexander is Wellington Aracena and Jose Mejia. For giving up Aracena and then Caden Bodine and Slater DeBrun earlier for the Shane Baz deal. That's 3 players that the Orioles acquired at the draft or the trade deadline this past season for getting talent. So I know that when we say getting talent, I tweeted about this and someone was like, well, that's putting a lot of stock in getting talent in Blaze Alexander. You're getting someone to fill the shoes of Jackson Holliday, who's just been announced.
Hopefully fill the shoes of Jackson
Hopefully
Holliday.
filling the shoes of Jackson Holliday, but who's just been announced that he can't even start opening day. So it's like, yes, it might not be the flashiest name when you give up prospects who you just acquired, but you're still getting somebody that can be someone on opening day.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, too, when you come to a scenario like the trade deadline and you are trading away established big league talent for prospects like a Wellington Aracena, there's oftentimes a knee-jerk reaction to go like, okay, this guy might not even make the big leagues. What kind of player are we actually getting in return? And then turn the calendar a few months, he ends up getting dealt away for a guy that you know is going to contribute at the big league level. So you never know what's going to come of those trades. But on the bullpen, there are a lot of right-handers that could potentially fill the shoes of Cade Stroud. We have talked about some of them in the past. If you're a listener of the show, you know my guy is Anthony Nunez. There are other right-handers too. I think there are locks in Helsley, Kittredge, Cano, and Wells. That's already 4 right-handed relief options. Rico Garcia pitched really, really well down the stretch last year. Seems like his odds of making the opening day roster just went up. Anthony Nunez, Cameron Foster, Jose Espada, Yarmil Geraldo, Hans Kraus, Keegan Gillies. Colin Selby would have been in that conversation too if he were not injured at this point. That's a lot of right-handers that I think you would feel pretty comfortable with on the opening day roster that could potentially take Stroud's role.
Yeah, and Mike Elias did say today as well with the media that Tyler Wells will prep as a starter. They're not yet ready to make that determination of whether he's kind of coming out of the rotation or coming out of the bullpen, but it seems likely, if all goes according to plan with the way the rotation looks right now, that you would have Wells coming out of the bullpen, which he's done historically very well out of relief. But the ones, I'm glad you mentioned the ones kind of on lock, because 2 of them you got this offseason, which is huge. The Keegan Aiken, who had a lot of opportunity getting the saves last year when he was kind of thrown into that closer role with Felix Bautista falling to injury. Dietrich Enns is that one kind of lefty that sticks out that you acquired. That wasn't the same deal as, no, I'm thinking this was after
Dietrich Enns, I believe, was cash considerations from the Tigers.
Yes. And so the AAA options, you have like maybe a Cade Povich. They said, Michael Elias said that Chase McDermott will be considered as a reliever this camp.
Yeah.
Which is important because he was getting a lot of reps in AAA at the end of last year out of relief.
And looked really good. Outside of his first bullpen appearance in AAA last year, where he gave up, I think, 5 earned runs.
Yeah.
Just because, he was transitioning to the role. It was totally new. I don't think he gave up more than 1 earned run in a relief appearance since then. It was a lot of strikeouts. He limited the walks.
Yep.
He looked excellent in that role.
Yeah. And easy to forget sometimes about Albert Suarez just because he was injured for so much of last year. But he's someone who's had experience out of the rotation and out of the bullpen. So there are quite a big chunk of names that you could use, but like you said, lots of right-handers.
Grant Wolfram, another left-handed option too. We are getting some comments on Facebook about Cade Povich out of the bullpen potentially as well. On the surface, I think it would make sense. It is a lefty who is good the first time through the order and has high strikeout numbers. That bodes well for a potential relief option. I do also want to emphasize that while we are talking about a position player injury, there are always starting pitching injuries. It never takes only 5 guys to get through a season in your starting rotation. Think back to 2023 when the Orioles were incredibly healthy. They still needed, I believe, 9 guys to make a start that season. Last year, that number was in the teens. So, yes, it might be enticing as one of our lights randomly changes colors in the middle of our podcast. That's the beauty of watching on YouTube and Facebook. Yes, it might be enticing to look at an arm like Cade Povich and say, man, he might be really good out of the bullpen. I would exercise caution there because I think Povich, for as good as he might be in that role, is probably more valuable as starting pitching depth at this point. Even if he does not crack the opening day roster as a starter, there is a real possibility that if you're counting Tyler Wells and Albert Suarez and guys like that, Povich is somewhere in the 6th, 7th, 8th best starting pitcher option that you have outside of the starting 5. And that's really, really valuable. You are going to need Cade Povich to start games this season. Yeah. I almost guarantee it. So I would hesitate to put him in that bullpen role at this point.
Which is also probably exactly why Elias said that Wells will prep as a starter as well, because he knows that chances are he's going to have to come in out of the rotation at some point this year. Probably also the same that we don't necessarily talk about Brandon Young out of the bullpen. I know he has lesser of strikeout per 9 inning numbers than Cade Povich, but we've seen some great flashes out of Brandon Young, and Brendan had a great article this morning on the depth in mainly those 2 guys, so you should check that out on MASNsports.com.
Nice plug. I didn't even have to plug that.
But, well, it'd be kind of weird if you plugged your own article.
Yeah, I guess it would.
But one of the options that was not invited to camp that I was hoping for is Tyson Neighbors, and he would have been a very cool option. But he also
still need to see Neighbors
hasn't
pitch
even
in
been
AAA.
at AAA. So that'll probably a conversation for later down the season.
Yeah, I think so. We were initially on this podcast supposed to talk about the spring training storylines. You want to run through them a little bit quickly here as we near the end of our podcast. Obviously, the bulk of our conversation today had to be about the injury to Jackson Holliday. Jordan Westburg's injury we haven't talked about as much. We know obliques can be nagging, but it sounds like he should hopefully be back soon. So if there is more to talk about on the Jordan Westburg injury, we will talk about it. Really encouraging news, like you mentioned earlier, that Zach Eflin is a full go for camp. That means a lot for the starting rotation. Unfortunately, Colin Selby on the injured list with shoulder inflammation too. So those are the injury updates that we got today from Mike Elias. But let's talk about some of these camp storylines. We hit on a few of them already, which were the camp battle, which will probably be for the bench spots position player-wise. The fact that the bullpen is a little bit more up in the air now without Cade Stroud, but there are still plenty of guys to potentially take that role, especially right-handers. No starting pitching additions since Shane Baz and Zach Eflin, I think, is a storyline. Will the Orioles continue to add there? It's not going to be Framber Valdez, who reportedly agreed to a deal with the Detroit Tigers. I don't know. There's probably a larger
who also got a deal to the Tigers.
There's probably a larger conversation to be had there with Framber Valdez. All I will say on that topic is that he is really talented, and it took him until February to sign, which tells me that there are either large discrepancies in what the two parties think he should be receiving contract-wise, or there are other issues somewhere. It just
means that there's something that we don't know.
There's something going on.
Right.
That prevented him from signing until February.
Also, very expensive for someone that you... pretty much probably everyone in the league that was going out for a starting pitcher had concerns about something with Framber Valdez. So I think it's a lot of money for someone that might have had concerns with clubhouse presence.
Never met the man. Don't want to disparage how he is in the clubhouse. There is, of course, a thing that may have happened between him and his catcher during a game last season. We don't need to dive into all of that. Framber Valdez is not an Oriole. Wish him the best in Detroit.
Yes.
There are other starting pitchers still available. The Zach Gallen market was probably waiting for a Framber Valdez decision. He is still available, needs a bounce back. We saw the kind of pitcher that he could be a few seasons ago. We haven't seen it in a few years now. Chris Bassett, Zach Littell, Justin Verlander, like you mentioned, just went to the Tigers. So there are still starting pitchers available. Will the Orioles continue to add there? Mike Elias said that he was happy with how the rotation looked at this point. A healthy Zach Eflin goes a long way in making that rotation look even better. Shane Baz, Craig Albertez said yesterday that he thought Baz's upside was a Cy Young winner.
Yeah.
Tells you how highly they think of him. There is still a possibility that the Orioles add. Mike Elias did not rule that out, but as of right now, they feel good about where the starting pitching rotation is at. On that point as well, it's also Craig Albertez's first spring training.
I know.
It's a fun little storyline.
That is fun.
We don't really know how it's going to go. We don't know how different it's going to look from years past. We don't know what he is going to try to implement. It's going to be cool.
And same goes for everyone that he brought in his coaching staff as well.
Yeah, so we will see how spring training kind of functions for the Orioles this year. What kinds of things are emphasized, what kinds of things are not. I think one storyline, too, was where does Kobe Mayo play defense? Asked Mike Elias about this yesterday. He said that he will get time at other positions, excluding first base. He'll get time there as well, but presume that means third base, which was his natural position for a while. Could be more of a need now with the Jackson Holliday injury, as we've talked about. Could be a corner outfield, too. I think that's probably less of a need than the infield at this point, but we could potentially see him there.
Yeah.
Could be interesting. What role does Tyler Wells play? I think that's a conversation, too. You mentioned that Wells is being built up as a starter. They are not ready to close the door on that. He looked really good as a starter in 4 games last year, but he still looked really good as a starter. If it is as a reliever that his role ends up being, I still think there's a conversation there about what his relief role looks like. Is he a swingman who is giving you 3 innings at a time out of the bullpen? Is he a high leverage guy? I think even if it is in the bullpen, I'm still curious to see what his role might look like.
Mm-hmm.
Final storyline I've got, just how's Heston Kjerstad? Excited to see him back.
Yeah.
Excited to see him playing baseball. Does he factor into the big league outfield conversation? I'm not sure. We've got to see how he looks. Is he in, top baseball shape? Is he going to need some time at AAA to kind of get his feet back under him after having so much time off last year? We'll see, but just excited to see him at spring training.
Also, tons of waiver claims that they made that would be excited to see.
Yeah.
In spring training and how the roster shakes up with them. Obviously, Big Christmas was one of them. Will Robertson, Weston Wilson, another one. So lots of outfielders that are going to be there. I think that the outfield feels pretty set right now, kind of barring injuries or not. But you feel pretty good with your outfield of Tyler O'Neill, Colton Cowser, Taylor Ward, likely as your everyday. Maybe Dylan Beaver's slotting into that conversation as well. Hopefully Heston Kjerstad can enter that conversation too, going off of that last topic that you made.
Yeah, I guess one more storyline too might just be, are they done in the bullpen either? Because maybe there's a world where Cade Stroud no longer having a spot in the Orioles bullpen opens up a spot to make a deal to acquire a bullpen piece, or just make a deal in free agency to acquire a bullpen piece. We shall see. I think there's a possibility that the Orioles continue to add somewhere on the pitching front. Any other storylines I missed, Annie?
I'm trying to go through my notes and think, but I think we've hit them all.
Yeah, I mean, things just got real foggy for this conversation given the Jackson Holliday injury news, the Jordan Westberg injury news. It certainly clouds the excitement a little bit. Very excited the pitchers and catchers are down there getting started with spring training. The new complex down at Ed Smith Stadium looks awesome. The indoor hitting facility that Mike Elias said might be the best place to hit indoors in the world, given all of the information that they are able to get just from guys taking BP. They have the cool indoor 8-pack, which is essentially 8 mounds right next to each other, so you can have a lot of bullpens going at one time.
Cool.
Looks awesome. So that stuff is all exciting.
I guess the one last storyline that I would add is just Basayo. Like, what is he going to look like in camp this year? Because he's not necessarily fighting for a spot on the roster. He pretty much has one. He's going to be the backup catcher.
Yeah.
But just a different role in camp this year. Elias and Albie yesterday with the media said that it's going to be a lot more of kind of picking up those catching responsibilities in terms of leadership, game calling, like working with pitchers, getting to build those relationships. And they said that he's already impressed the new coaching staff a lot, not only on the defensive side of things, of course, offensively as well. And he got there early too, so he's making his mark in terms of building those relationships with the pitchers. So.
Yeah, and his physical stature apparently
Yeah.
really stood out to Craig Albernez, who made the joke that he really dwarfs him, but then again, most people do,
Yeah.
as Craig Albernez said. I'm not saying that to you, Craig Albernez. Those
He
were
was
your
like,
words.
I forgot how big that guy was. But they said he came in even better shape than last year, too, physical shape.
Yeah, excited to see him and what he can do in
Mm-hmm.
spring. But I think that'll just about do it for this week's edition of The Bird's Nest. Thank you so much for following along on our YouTube and Facebook questions. We really appreciate your comments on both of those platforms, as we are live every Wednesday at 11 a.m. on our YouTube and Facebook channels, or you can catch us after the fact on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us here on The Bird's Nest. We really do encourage you to follow along with us live if you can on those two platforms. Hopefully, as you heard today, we try to engage with you as much as possible, answer your questions about anything going on Orioles-wise. So if you'd like to be part of the conversation, that is a really good way to do it. But big thank you to Bobby Blanco, our producer behind the scenes. For Annie Claff, I am Brendan Mortensen, and we'll catch you next time.